All right, at the end of last class, I was working with the digital painting and just doing a lot of refined painting, right? So I want to find my PSD. Here it is. Open it up in Photoshop. I've got all these references. And now I might look at the references that help me understand a finishing technique that I want to use everywhere. And one I actually like is this artist. So I'm actually going to bring these images into Photoshop. Whoops. And I'm using my custom brush. What's nice about Photoshop is it will remember my brush. And there are videos about how to create your own. I'm going to lock that, go to my refined paint layer, and I can see the different steps, right? So I have my base layer, my refined paint layer. That's what it's kind of looking like. And you'll see it is actually very similar to this inspiration, which is all done with oil stick. But this has kind of wilder color combinations, right? And it doesn't look like a person yet. So why are inspirations important? Well, without them to push you into different directions, you tend to just kind of match the photo and just repeat yourself over and over again. And you want to avoid doing that. So I'm going to lock these other layers. So I can only paint on what I have. And I've added a few other inspirations. One is Wayne Thiebaud, who was a West Coast pop artist. And you can see how he'll do outlines of complementary colors. These are great ways to finish off. He has green on this side, which is the side where the highlight's hitting. He has orange as reflected light on this side, which is the side of the shadow. So it's kind of opposite what usual color theory is, with warm highlights in the shadows and cool like accents in the highlights. And these are things I can use to kind of play with finishing it off, right? Also, I haven't done all of my refined painting yet. You can see all of that gray space. So I need to just keep that up. And to do that, I use my brush. It's my Adobe brush. I want it to be pressure sensitive. And I want it to be not fully opaque. So I have it at 56% opacity. And now I'm going to start stealing some of these other tones. So it's good to bring in new color inspiration at this stage. So you're not just reasserting old colors over and over again. And it depends on the kind of look you're wanting. If you want it to look really smooth and photorealistic, then you kind of just use the smudge tool and you kind of smooth between existing colors and shapes. And like always, we've had a break from this, so you can attack it with a lot of energy, hopefully, this Monday morning. When you're doing portraits or when you're doing pets, they're never just one thing. It's good to have multiple references because just for hairstyle, right, it can change. My dog, my cat, their coloring has changed, each year pretty significantly. How much white or gray is in their fur. So if I'm doing like a pet portrait, I want to find the balance that feels right instead of just relying on one photo and matching everything from that one photo. Now, because this is our introduction to digital painting, you are not expected to master it, but you're expected to work from at least one photo reference, preferably more. You're expected to build up a base paint layer where you get rid of all the empty space, and then on top of that, a refined paint layer. In the base paint layer, you can just use default brushes, but for the refined paint layer, I want you to use a more customized brush. Whether you make the shape yourself or not doesn't matter to me, but that you understand the brush settings, especially shape dynamics. That's what matters a lot. And that's what's going to help you make the best use of brushes when you leave the class. The great thing about these lower opacities in painting is I can put crazy colors everywhere and they'll always blend with the colors underneath. So even though the hair is blonde, I can put red in there, I can put green, I can put blue. It's all about just proportions. And the only danger of having this gray background instead of a white background, the white tends to make everything look dark, right? But the gray background, you need to remember to reassert brights, reassert your highlights. Otherwise, everything can get muddy. But I like the gray background because it shows me a balance of lights and darks, especially if you're going to add a background later. But generally, if it looks good on a gray background, it will also look good on a white background. So in finishing this off, I really want to notice the areas I haven't paid much attention to. Paid a lot of attention to the eyes, the nose, the eyebrows, but not so much to the ears, to the chin, to the neck. And these all matter. I say as I go back to the eyebrows. Now I'm only separating this into basically two layers. A base layer that I kind of all squashed together from different sketch layers, and then this refined paint layer. But you can always separate it out into more layers if you wanted. You could have layers for the eyes, layers for the forehead, layers for the mouth, layers for the hair. And that would allow you to stretch, warp, and manipulate them all individually. I think I just feel that digital painting's time consuming enough without having to build too many excess layers. It's like having too many bank accounts, right? And then you have to keep track of all of them. Too many credit cards. Also remember that you're just supposed to have fun. So if you want to do something kind of wild, you can. So I might do a new layer, make my brush really big, a little bit more opaque, and do this kind of thing, over it. Like I have in some of my references. Now when I do experiments like this, I do them on a new layer. So that I can kind of judge how helpful they are. And then I just go right back to refine painting. Now I have that to play with. For instance, with a different blending mode. So those of you who think you're finished, you can kind of play with being a little wilder, right? Using that exclusion filter, bringing that in. And then I can even just erase away from it with standard brushes. And go back to refine painting. Oh, shrink that brush. That's why it's good to lock the layer. Unless you're painting on it. So let's see how I'm doing. Let's get in the way. All right, now the parts that I've been really bored by, the jacket, the collar, I got to get those done. And mostly it's about just edge control, right? Like finding your edges, making them somewhat clean. We're not just trying to make it a photograph. Clearly, we're trying to put a lot of personality into it. And everyone's digital paintings should and will look very, very unique and different.